Hi there, today I'm going to be showing you a very cool trick that I learned that allows you to send Marketo data directly to Google Sheets without having to use a third-party middleman like Zapier or without having to use the Google Sheets API. In this example, we're going to pretend that we want to log all the registrants to our Marketo webinar in a Google Sheet. And the first thing we need to do is set up our Google Sheet. In this case, we've got 6 different columns: the timestamp that the person registered for the webinar, a lead link, first name, last name, company, and their email. And the lead link here just makes it very easy to go into Marketo and look at the lead detail of the person who registered for the webinar. So once we have our Google Sheet set up, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a Google Apps script. And I'll show you how to do this in a completely new sheet. So the first thing we're going to do is go to Extensions, App Script, and we're going to copy all this code from the blog post. So we're going to copy this. We're going to paste it in. And we can give this project a name. Let's call it Google Sheets Logging. And the important thing here is we need to change this your sheet name to match the name of the sheet that we want to log to. So in this case, let's just call this webinar registrants. This is the sheet we want to log to, and we're going to change this to be the exact same. And then we're going to hit save our code. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to deploy this code. So we go new deployment, make sure it's a web app, give it a description. The description in this case will actually be the name of the deployment. So let's just call it Marketo webinar registrants logging. Leave execute as me, and change who has access to be anyone. As I mentioned in the blog post, you might need to work with your IT team to edit the permissions of Google Sheets, and this Google Sheet in particular, so that anyone is an available option here. So then we click deploy. And after a few seconds of loading, you will then need to click authorize access and then select the Google profile, which should be the same Google profile that you created the sheet with. And then click allow. And then hopefully you can see these pop-ups. I know sometimes these pop-ups don't appear in Loom, but you'll get a screen which contains the web app URL. So copy that web app URL, and then we're going to use this in the next step when we create our Marketo webhook. So jumping back to the blog post quickly, we've copied in our Google script. And one thing to note is that this script's logic is very simple. All it does is it iterates through all the parameters that are sent via webhook from Marketo. So the first parameter is going to be put in the first column in the row. The second parameter is going to be put in the second column in the row, and so on until it's iterated through all the fields available in the payload. So the order that these fields appear in the webhook payload will be the order that they're pasted in the Google Sheet. So that's why if timestamp is first here, it's going to be the first value in the Google Sheet, and so on for all the rest of these fields. Okay, so going back to the blog post again, we copied in our JavaScript, we deployed the Google Apps script. The next part of our Marketo Google Sheets integration is creating a Marketo webhook to send the information about our webinar registrants to the Google Sheet URL that we just copied. So the first thing to do is go to admin, go new webhook, give the webhook a name, so Google Sheets It's logging. I already have one via this name, so I'm going to call it number 2. You can give it an optional description. The URL that we're going to send to is the URL that we copied from our deployment. So in this case, if we ever want to find that URL again, we can go to Manage Deployments, and then we can copy the web app URL here. And then that's what we're going to put in Marketo. The request type is post the template. You can copy this template as a starter. You might need to change some of these variable names to match the variable names or the field names in your Marketo instance. So you can copy this, paste that, and then in order for the Marketo lead link to work, you'll need to change these values here. The best thing to do is just open up a lead in your Marketo instance and then just copy the start of the URL from the database view and then paste that into the webhook. Okay, request token encoding, leave that as none. Response type, leave that as none. And then all you're going to do is hit create. Okay, so despite that login error, when you hit create, you'll be left with a webhook that looks like this. And then the next part to start logging to this Google Sheet for our webinar registrants is to call this webhook from the flow of the Marketo Smart Campaign. So if we go to, let's pretend that we've got this Smart Campaign here, which runs whenever someone registers for our webinar. So that will typically be when someone fills out your webinar registration form. And in this case, I've added a campaign is requested trigger. And this just makes it easy to test out that the flow is working. And I'll show you how we do that in the next step. But in the flow of this Smart Campaign, we've got a call webhook step. So you'll have many other steps here that run whenever you have a webinar registrant. All you need to do is just add one more to call this Google Sheets logging webhook. And then I'll show you what I mean by this campaign is requested step, making it easy to test the logging to the Google Sheet and your webinar Smart Campaign. So if you just search for a test lead in your Marketo database, so in this case, like Tyron. So once you've searched for that test lead, this will appear. And then you can go to Person Actions, Special, Request Campaign. And then we can call the campaign that I was just showing you guys and then click Run Now. So to show you this in action, I'm just going to go to the Google Sheet, delete these 2 rows. Delete that row. Delete this row. And then, where was I here? Let's run now. And obviously another way you could do this is if you actually open up this lead. So if you click on the lead ID and you go into the lead view, you can also do the exact same thing from here. You go Special, Request Campaign, and then, that's so annoying. And then once you're in here, after a hard refresh, there should be no login issues this time. So you go Request Campaign, and then the exact same as before, we're going to call that Google Sheets logging campaign. So we should have one in the sheet already. So we can see, yep, 17th of August 2024. That's when I'm recording this video. This was the first time the lead ran. And then if I call this again, we'll see that there will be a second row in that Google Sheet. So if we check our Google Sheet, we've then got that second row appearing here. And if we go to the activity log for the person, you'll see it says failed, but it's not actually failed because we can see that both of these did actually run successfully to send the information to the Google Sheet. So you can ignore 302 errors because a 302 error actually means it worked. So then going back to the blog post again, we've completed all of this setup in our Smart Campaign. I showed you how to test that it's working using the request campaign action. And then the final part of this is to note that if you have webinars one after the other, then all you need to do is to create a new tab in the same Google Sheet to log registrants for the new webinar. And then all you need to do is update the name. So if you create a new sheet for your next webinar, so like this could be webinar 1, and then for your next webinar, it's going to be webinar 2. You just need to change the reference in the code here to be webinar 2. So this is probably the easiest approach. Use the same Google Sheet and then create new tabs for each successive webinar that you have. But if you prefer and you actually want a new Google Sheet for each webinar, then you'll need to create a new sheet, and then in that new sheet, you'll need to create a new Google Apps script, create a new deployment, and then copy that new deployment URL and put that deployment URL in your webhook. So obviously there's a lot more work in creating a new Google Sheet because of all these steps you have to do. So it's much simpler just to create a new tab within a Google Sheet. And if you have webinars in succession, then you will only ever need one webhook pointing to one deployment URL to log your webinar registrants. However, if you have multiple webinars going on at the same time, then you will obviously need multiple webhooks pointing to multiple deployment URLs, because the multiple deployment URLs will correspond to either the separate Google Sheets or the separate tabs within the same Google Sheet that you want to log to. So this is how you can scale it and use this logic for sending Google Sheets for your webinars in the future. So now that you've taken a look at how you can integrate Marketo with Google Sheets and send directly from Marketo to Google Sheets without a third-party middleman or using the Google Sheets API, you can take a look at these other blog posts here, and you can see other use cases for webhooks, like how to send SMS is one example that I go through in this webhook guide. And then you can see other great use cases for Marketo tokens and Marketo trigger tokens, because as you can see, we touched a little bit on tokens here. You'll notice that we're using lead tokens in the payload of this webhook, and we're using a system date time token to log the time that the webhook ran. So check out these blog posts if you want to learn a little bit more. And if you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment. Comments also help boost the popularity of these videos, so that would really help me out. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, then please subscribe. Have a great day.